Okay everybody, this is our second video. This is going to cover how to install Ubuntu in a virtual machine. Now, we did make the video going over how to install VirtualBox, but for this I'm going to have to use VMware because for some odd reason VirtualBox is not like my computer. Whenever I try to go through the setup, once it's installed, it will not actually load, but for some odd reason it will work fine in VMware. There's a bit of an issue with the graphics, so I'm going to show you how to do it in VMware, but the principle is basically the same. It's just buttons are in different places in VMware and VirtualBox. First of all, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to get what's called an ISO image of Ubuntu. What that is, it's pretty much an image of a disk that can be burned to a disk and saved on your computer. We're not going to be burning it to a disk right now, though. It's not something you need to do for this. First thing you need to do is go to this web page right here. This is ubuntu.com. This is their main page. They have a lot of information on here for Ubuntu for your desktop, your phone, your tablet, TV server, all types of different things. To get the one that we're going to use, we're going to go to desktop up at the top and get Ubuntu now. And we're going to scroll down to the long-term support version. That way it's more stable, easier to get information if you run into any trouble. And we're also going to be using the 32-bit version. Okay, now right here is a contribution page that you can do if you want. This is what supports the company's free software so you can keep running, keep producing. This is totally optional, it's up to you. If you don't want to do any donations right now, you can always scroll down, go not now, take me to the download. You click on that and it will start to download. And it will automatically start from there. I'm just going to cancel this though because I did it ahead of schedule. And after that's done installing, all you have to do, open up your virtual machine software, whatever you're using, VirtualBox, VMware, anything else you might be using, and you're going to want to create a new one. VirtualBox, there's going to be a star up in the top left corner. It says start or new, I can't remember which. But for VMware, just create a new virtual machine. Typical is fine. And I'm going now for VirtualBox, you can actually select the ISO image that you're going to be using. We're not going to select that ahead of time because with the way VMware works, it will actually do the majority of the installation automatically without me having to do anything. And that's not the purpose of what we're trying to do here. We actually want you to be able to do a full installation of the system. So we're going to put I will install operating system later, but we are installing it now. That's just the option we have to select. And guest operating system is going to be Linux. And the version's Ubuntu. Just make sure that when you're selecting Ubuntu, you select the one that just says Ubuntu, not the one that says 64-bit. Same thing goes for VirtualBox. And there was an issue where I have a pre-existing Ubuntu drive, so we're just going to leave it named 2. Well, actually, let's see. We're going to get rid of that one. Alright, now generally the recommended size is 20 gigs for a virtual disk. Now personally I'd recommend at least 40 if you're actually going to be running things on it, installing updates, actually testing out the system and getting a feel for it. If you're just doing it just to run a test install to see if you can install it, in all honesty 8 to 10 gigs is normally fine, but it's all dependent on what your computer can offer. For this, just because it's an install and I don't want it to take forever to make the disk, I'm only going to make it a 10 gig thing. And we're going to set it as a single file. Single files are more stable than multiple files. The only benefit of multiple files is if you plan on transferring it from computer to computer. Okay, now we're going to go in to customize the hardware real quick, because it's automatically set to 1 gig of memory, which is perfectly fine. You can actually get away with half a gig of memory. But for my purposes, generally I like to put it at 4 gigs of memory just to make sure. Now for the processors, I only have one processor in this machine. Most computers normally only have one processor. On the other hand though, it is a 6-core system, but I'm only going to select it to use 2 cores. Now, here's where it's a little different for VMware and VirtualBox. As I said, for VirtualBox, when it's asking you for that CD, you can just put the ISO image. You don't have to worry about it automatically configuring, trying to do an easy install. You can just select the ISO. For VMware, this is where we have to go in to select that ISO. You select Use ISO Image File, and you just browse wherever it is. This is my ISOs right here, and we're going to select the Ubuntu desktop version, 12.04.2. Could open that up, and now everything else is fine, but just for the sake of going through it, you have a available floppy drive if you want to do that, your network adapters so you can get internet connection from your current connection already established, USB controller present. Normally you're going to want to do that because the majority of mice and keyboards now are USB. Also, if you want to use a USB drive or anything like that inside of it. Sound card generally are auto detect. You normally want to leave it just in case you want to listen to something, or if it starts making any funny sounds, just so you can hear all of it. You can also set up printer, and you can change some settings for a display. And we're going to close that out real quick and finish. Okay, now the virtual machine is created. This doesn't mean that Ubuntu is installed though. We do still have to install that operating system. This is just the actual virtual machine that we will be running it in. So we turn it on and let it load. Okay, now we have several options here. We have a bunch of different languages we can use. Obviously, we're going to be using English for this installation, but if English isn't your native tongue or you feel comfortable with another language, feel free to use it. Completely up to you. And there's two other options that we have. We have Try Ubuntu and Install Ubuntu. Trying Ubuntu is if you just want to try the full system, see how it runs, won't actually install any software. This is also very good if, say, your computer crashes and you want to retrieve some files off of it. This is actually a good way to get those files because you can burn this ISO to a disk, put this in your computer, and be able to access all the information on your computer, even if your operating system got corrupted and you can't load up any of your files. This way you can actually retrieve those files. That's something entirely different though that we can go over at a later point. The one we're going to be doing today is Install Ubuntu. That installs the full system for us. So we're just going to click that. Now, there are some basic requirements that you're going to need to follow. Obviously, one is that you're going to have a minimum amount of space, which is 4.3 gigs. That is just for the base operating system, though. You cannot install anything extra. If you do, it may even crash a system if you try to install more than the space you have. So, as I said, even though we're only doing an installation, we're not even installing updates in this, we're just doing an installation, I would still recommend at least 8 or 10 gigs of storage. It's also going to require that it's connected to the internet. Now, if you're on a laptop doing this, it also will automatically detect that, hey, this is a laptop running off of a battery. It needs to be plugged in. That way, make sure that the system doesn't randomly shut down in the middle of the installation because that will mess up the installation, make it unrecoverable. You'll have to start from scratch. And now we have two options here. We have the download updates while installing. We're not going to worry about that, but that's always fine to do if you're doing a full installation. You want to be up to date when it's fully installed. This won't add to the time, though, of the installation, so just consider that. And then you also have install this third-party software. This is just different software for plugins, MP3, things like that. Not something we're going to worry about right now. Now, we have two options here for the installation type. We can erase a disk and install Ubuntu, which is fine because we specifically made a virtual hard drive for this virtual machine. So we don't have to worry about losing any information. The only time we would have to worry is if you are actually using a physical hard drive for the VM, or if you're installing it on your system. That's when you don't want to really erase the disk and install Ubuntu. You may want to make sure that there's nothing on that hard drive, that you're actually going to partition it for separate sectors. Now, the something else will allow you to create or resize partitions yourself. Instead of having Ubuntu do it automatically, because there's normally, for a basic Linux distribution, a minimum of 4 partitions that need to be made. But we'll go into that later because that's a more advanced step. We can go over that in a later class if anybody wants to. So we're just going to ignore that for right now and do the erase disk and install Ubuntu. And it'll automatically detect this is the only hard drive available. And we're going to install. Now, while it's downloading information, it's just going to ask us some basic questions like our time zone here. Should automatically detect it, normally based off of your IP address, though. Our keyboard layout. Generally, another thing that's automatically detect it. And now it's going to ask you for your name. You can honestly put whatever you want in there. It's up to you. I'm just going to put Ubuntu. And it will automatically fill in your computer's name. You can change that if you want. Feel free to. The only thing is, it can't be the same as... Excuse me. It can't be the same as your name. And username, it's fine as it is. And we're just going to put a basic password in here. So ignore the fact that it's a weak password. This isn't something that we're actually going to be working with. This is just a test run. So this is going to be getting deleted. There's no need to keep it secure. Continue. And now, this right here is just some basic information on Ubuntu. Feel free to read it. I do recommend it for beginners. That way you just get some extra information on different software you can use, different things that you can do with Ubuntu. It's actually some good information. I highly recommend reading all of it. And this is just information how to get more info or support on Ubuntu. Now, this installation will take some time, so I'm going to leave this here just so everybody who wants to can follow this, make sure their installation is running correctly. I will be turning off my mic for this point. So if you want, feel free to skip ahead until we finish this part of the installation. Okay, the installation has finished. Now from this point all we have to do is restart the system. Now right here is where I ran into an issue using VirtualBox. From this point it froze up and I wasn't able to do anything. So that's the reason why I'm not using VirtualBox for this installation. All you gotta do is hit enter when that prompt comes up and it will automatically restart it for you. And there you go. Now we have a full install of Ubuntu. This is a login screen that will come up whenever you start it. Just type in our password. And there you have it. You have a working Ubuntu virtual machine. This way you can test Linux out, try to run it, learn some things. If you have any other questions, just let me know, and I'll try to clarify any issues that anybody has. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the video.